I used to believe that after 46 years of marriage, there was nothing left to surprise me. My husband Thomas and I had built what looked like a perfect life, a big house, 2 cars, weekend barbecues, and a daughter we adored. But sometimes the biggest lies hide behind the most beautiful facades. My story began to unravel one ordinary afternoon. I was sorting through old photo albums, the kind my late sister Rebecca loved to make. She'd passed away decades ago from leukemia, and even after all these years, I still missed her terribly. She was everything I wasn't, bold, carefree, radiant. When she died, I took in her newborn daughter and raised her as my own. My husband had supported the decision fully, or so I thought. He said, "Family takes care of family," and so we did. That little girl, my girl, became the center of my world. I named her Grace. She was the reason I woke up every morning. The reason I forgave my husband's coldness, his late nights, and his distance that only grew with time. But life has a cruel way of peeling back the truth. It all began when Grace called me one night, her voice trembling. "Mom," she said, "I got one of those DNA ancestry kits from a friend at work. It's just for fun. Maybe I'll find out if we have Irish roots or something." I laughed, unaware that this little fun would destroy everything I believed in. A few weeks later, she came to my house with a pale face and shaking hands. "Mom," she whispered, there's something wrong. The results don't make sense." I took the papers from her, smiling. "Oh, sweetheart, those things are never accurate." But as my eyes skimmed the document, my heart froze. Her DNA didn't match mine, not even remotely. It wasn't just a mix-up or a margin of error. According to the results, Grace wasn't my biological niece. And the shocking part, she was my husband's biological child. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. I read the line again and again, hoping I'd misunderstood. But the truth was printed there in black and white. Grace was my husband's daughter, and the only possible mother was my dying sister. I remember standing up, feeling my knees buckle beneath me. Grace reached for me, tears in her eyes. "Mom, I swear I didn't know. I just wanted to learn more about my health." But her words faded. The walls seemed to close in. The air turned thick with betrayal. For 46 years, I'd built my life on love, loyalty, and family. But that foundation had been poisoned from the start. My husband, Thomas, had not only betrayed me but had stolen something sacred, the last piece of my sister's memory. And I had been living under the same roof as his secret all along. That night, when he came home, I was waiting in the dark. "Thomas," I said quietly, holding the DNA paper in my trembling hand, "we need to talk." He froze in the doorway, his eyes darting to the document. For a split second, I saw something. Not guilt, but fear. And that's when I knew. He already knew. Thomas stood in the doorway, his hand still gripping the knob like he might run any second. The color drained from his face, and for a moment, neither of us said a word. The silence between us was heavy. 46 years of marriage, built on trust, now hanging by a single thread. I could feel my heart pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. "Thomas," I said again, my voice low but shaking, "is it true?" He didn't answer. He just stared at me, at the paper in my hand, at the photo of Grace on the mantel, at the ghosts between us. "Say something," I demanded, my tone rising. "Tell me this isn't what it looks like. Tell me Grace isn't—" He closed his eyes, and that silence told me everything. I dropped the paper. "Oh my God." He stepped toward me, hands raised. "Margaret, listen to me. It's not what you think." "Not what I think?" I screamed, my voice echoing through the house. "My dying sister, Thomas. My sister." Tears stung my eyes, but rage burned hotter. "You had an affair with Rebecca while I was taking care of her. She was sick, she was dying. How could you—" "It wasn't like that," he shouted, finally snapping. His voice was raw, desperate. "It wasn't love, it was a mistake. One time, before she got worse, she came to me, she was scared, she needed comfort." "Comfort?" I spat. "You call sleeping with my dying sister comfort?" He rubbed his face, shaking. "She didn't want you to know. She begged me not to tell you. She was ashamed, Margaret. And when she found out she was pregnant, she told me it wasn't mine. I believed her." I laughed bitterly. "You believed her? Or you wanted to?" He didn't answer. That was the moment the last piece of my heart broke. I turned away, my body trembling, my breath uneven. All these years, I thought Grace was my sister's last gift. "And all this time she was your sin," he whispered. "I loved her too, in a different way. But I love you, Margaret. I never meant for this to happen. 46 years, I said quietly, staring at the wedding photo on the wall. 46 years, and I never really knew the man I married. He reached out to touch me, but I stepped back. I couldn't even bear his shadow near mine. What about the money? I asked suddenly, remembering the account that had been quietly drained. Grace's college fund. The $78,000 my sister left her. Don't tell me you didn't touch that too. He hesitated. That single pause told me the truth before he even spoke. I borrowed it, he said weakly. I had investments that went bad. I meant to replace it. I slapped him so hard that my hand stung. You stole from her, I shouted. From your own daughter, from my sister's child. Tears streamed down my face as I backed away from him. You didn't just betray me, Thomas. You betrayed Rebecca, you betrayed Grace, you betrayed every promise you ever made. He sank into a chair, his head in his hands, whispering, I didn't know how to fix it. But it was too late for fixing. That night I packed a suitcase. I didn't even look back at him when I walked out the door. Grace was waiting outside in her car, crying. She reached for me, but I couldn't even touch her. I just said softly, You didn't do this, sweetheart. But I can't be here right now. As we drove away, I looked in the rearview mirror and saw Thomas standing at the window, small, defeated and utterly alone. But I didn't feel pity. I felt empty. Everything I thought I knew, my marriage, my family, my life, had been built on a lie. And I was determined to uncover just how deep that lie went. The days after I left Thomas felt like walking through fog. My house, our house, had always been my sanctuary. But now it felt like a museum of deceit. I couldn't stay there. Every picture, every memory, every piece of furniture whispered lies. So I checked into a small hotel near the coast. The kind where no one asks questions and no one cares who you are. I spent nights staring at the ceiling, thinking about Rebecca, my sister, the one person I loved unconditionally. I tried to remember her smile, her warmth, the way she used to braid my hair when we were kids. And then the image would blur into anger. How could she do that to me? But then again, she was dying. Maybe she'd been scared, desperate, confused. Maybe she didn't know what else to do. It was Thomas who should have known better. He was the one who broke the sacred bond of trust. Not just between us as husband and wife, but between two sisters who once shared everything. Grace called every day, crying, apologizing, begging me to come home. But I wasn't ready. She was innocent, yes, but being near her hurt too much. Her smile reminded me of Rebecca. Her eyes of Thomas. Every feature of hers screamed betrayal and love all at once. A combination that tore me apart. On the fourth day, I got a call from a blocked number. When I answered, it was a man's voice, low, firm, unfamiliar. Mrs. Harris, he said, I'm calling from Bayview Financial. We need to confirm a few details regarding the accounts in your husband's name. I frowned. What accounts? There was silence. Then the man asked carefully, You're not aware of the offshore transfers made over the last 2 years? My blood ran cold. No, I said slowly. I'm not. He sighed. Ma'am, I think you need to come in. The next morning, I sat in a cold office, across from a financial investigator named Greg. He pulled out a folder, his expression unreadable. Your husband moved over $320,000 into various offshore accounts, he said. A portion of that money appears to have come from your joint savings, as well as your daughter's trust fund. I stared at him. That's impossible. I would have noticed. He slid a few printed statements across the desk. He used a business account under your sister's old non-profit name, the one she started before she passed. My hands trembled as I read the papers. There it was, Rebecca's name, her old foundation, and Thomas listed as managing treasurer. The money was gone, vanished. How long? I whispered. About 6 years, Greg said. It's been moved and hidden several times. Whoever did this knew what they were doing. I sat there in stunned silence. Thomas hadn't just cheated on me, he'd stolen from me. From Grace, from my dead sister. Every word, every promise he'd made over 46 years was a carefully crafted lie. Greg handed me his card. If you want, I can connect you with a lawyer who specializes in financial recovery. But you'll have to be ready for a fight. I looked at the card, then at the folder full of proof. My hands stopped shaking. For the first time in days, I felt something other than grief. Resolve. When I left that office, I wasn't the same woman who walked in. I wasn't the loyal wife, the forgiving sister, or the trusting fool anymore. I was someone else now, someone ready to burn down every lie Thomas had built. That night I called Grace. She answered in tears. "Mom, please, I just want to fix this." I took a deep breath. "Grace, sweetheart, I love you. But this isn't your burden. I need you to stay strong and let me handle this." "What are you going to do?" she asked. I looked out the hotel window, the city lights reflecting in my eyes. "I'm going to make him pay. For everything." It wasn't just about revenge. It was about reclaiming my life, my truth, after decades of living in his shadow. And as I sat down with those papers spread before me, I realized something chilling. Thomas hadn't just been preparing for retirement. He'd been preparing to run. The next morning, I called the lawyer Greg had recommended. A sharp, no-nonsense woman named Evelyn Carter. Her voice carried authority, the kind that made you sit up straighter without realizing it. When I explained everything, the affair, the stolen money, the offshore accounts, she didn't gasp or sound shocked. She simply said, "Mrs. Harris, I've seen men like your husband before. Let's make sure you never have to again." We met the following day at her office. A sleek building downtown with glass walls and a view of the harbor. Evelyn was in her early 40s, confident and precise. She flipped through my documents, occasionally nodding, occasionally smirking. "He's clever," she said finally, "but not clever enough. He left trails, emotional and financial. That's what men like him always do." Her plan was simple but powerful. We would freeze every asset under his name, subpoena the offshore banks, and push for an emergency court injunction. But to strengthen the case, I'd need evidence, not just of the money, but of his deceit. That night, I returned home for the first time since leaving. The air was thick with ghosts. The smell of Thomas's cologne still lingered, faint but mocking. His car was gone. Good. I needed time. I walked into his study, the one room I'd rarely entered over the years. It was neat, organized to the point of obsession. I opened drawers, checked behind books, flipped through old ledgers. Nothing. Then, at the bottom of his locked filing cabinet, I found a small box wrapped in an old blue cloth. It was Rebecca's. I knew that fabric instantly. She used it to wrap her journals when we were kids. My hands trembled as I unwrapped it. Inside, there was a small leather-bound diary, faded, delicate with her name inscribed inside the cover. Rebecca Harris, May 1977. I sat down on the floor and began to read. The first few pages were full of ordinary entries about her illness, her treatment, her hope to survive. But as I turned the pages, the words grew darker, heavier. Then, one night's entry stopped my breath. "Thomas came to visit today. I told him it was a mistake. I told him it couldn't happen again. But he looked at me with such pain in his eyes. He said he couldn't lose both of us. And when I told him I was pregnant, he begged me not to tell Margaret." I felt tears burning my eyes. My sister, my dying sister, had written her guilt into these pages. I want her to raise the baby. I want Grace to have the kind of mother I won't live long enough to be. I'll take this secret to my grave if it means Margaret never feels betrayed. I closed the diary, shaking. My heart felt like it was splitting open all over again. Rebecca hadn't betrayed me. She'd protected me in the most painful, impossible way. She'd carried her guilt alone, dying with the belief that silence was mercy. But Thomas? He'd taken that silence and twisted it into a lifetime of deceit. As I sat there on the study floor, I realized I didn't just want justice anymore. I wanted peace, for me, for Rebecca, and for Grace. I took the diary to Evelyn the next day. She read through the entries with quiet focus. "This," she said, closing the book, "is your leverage. Not for pity, for power. He's hidden behind your silence for decades. Now we'll use the truth to expose him." She filed the motion that week. The court date was set for the following month, and soon, the entire facade Thomas built began to crumble. His accounts were frozen, his business partners questioned, his offshore records subpoenaed. But Evelyn wasn't done yet. "Men like Thomas don't crumble quietly," she warned. "Be ready. He'll come for you one last time before he falls." And she was right. 3 nights later, I woke to the sound of my hotel door handle turning slowly. I froze. The sound of a man's voice whispered from the other side, low, familiar, desperate. "Margaret, please. We need to talk." It was Thomas. I sat up in bed, my heart pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. The sound of his voice, calm, almost pleading, filled the room through the thin door. For a second, I froze. Then something inside me snapped. The woman who once feared his silence, his temper, his control, she was gone. I stood, walked to the door, and said coldly, "If you try to enter, I'll call the police." He hesitated, then said softly, "Margaret, please. Just listen. 5 minutes. That's all I'm asking." Against my better judgment, I opened the door just enough to see his face. He looked different, thinner, worn down, desperate. The arrogance he always carried had melted away. But I knew better than to mistake weakness for remorse. "What do you want, Thomas?" I asked, my voice sharp. He ran a trembling hand through his hair. "You've destroyed everything. My accounts, my company." "Your lies," I interrupted. "I destroyed your lies. Don't confuse the two." His eyes flickered with anger. "You don't understand what you've done. You've dragged our family name through the mud." I laughed bitterly. "You did that the moment you betrayed me and Rebecca. The moment you stole from your own daughter." "Grace isn't," he began, but stopped himself. I stepped forward. "Isn't what? Your daughter? She has your eyes, Thomas. She has your temper. And now, thanks to that DNA test, she has your legacy too, whether you like it or not." He looked like a man cornered. His jaw tightened. Then, for a moment, his expression changed, almost like sorrow. "It wasn't supposed to happen like this," he whispered. "Rebecca was dying. She begged me not to tell you. I thought I was protecting you." "Protecting me," I spat. "You were protecting yourself. You used her death to justify a betrayal that lasted decades. You let me live a lie." He sighed heavily and sank onto the edge of the small sofa in the room. "You were always the strong one, Margaret. You would have left me if you'd known. I couldn't lose you then. But you did now," I said quietly. "And this time you'll lose everything." I turned to leave, but then he said something that made me freeze mid-step. "She wasn't supposed to know either." I turned slowly. "Who?" "Grace," he said, voice trembling. "I told her the truth a few years ago. She confronted me. She hated me for it. That's why she left home." The world spun around me. "You mean—" "She knew," he said, tears glistening in his eyes. "She knew I was her father. She begged me to tell you. I couldn't. I was too ashamed." I felt something break inside me. All those years Grace avoided me. Her coldness, her distance, it wasn't rebellion. It was pain. The same pain I had been carrying without knowing why. I whispered, "You didn't just betray me, Thomas. You broke her too." He buried his face in his hands, shaking. "I know," he said. "I've lost everything that ever mattered." For a moment I almost pitied him. Almost. But then I remembered. Rebecca's dying words in her diary, the love she had for Grace, the guilt she carried alone. I couldn't let his crocodile tears wash away that truth. "You don't get to be the victim now," I said quietly. "You did this. And tomorrow the court will see exactly who you are." When I turned away for the last time, I didn't look back. The next morning, I testified in court. I presented Rebecca's diary, the bank statements, the DNA results. The judge listened, expression unreadable. Thomas's lawyer tried to twist the story, paint me as emotional, unstable. But the evidence spoke louder than either of us could. By the end of the trial, the verdict was clear. I was granted 70% of the marital assets. The court ordered restitution for the stolen money and opened an investigation into his offshore dealings. Thomas sat there, pale, defeated, his hands shaking. Grace was in the back row. When I saw her, I couldn't hold back the tears anymore. After court, she approached me quietly. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then she said softly, "I'm sorry, Mom, for everything." I reached for her hand, gripping it tightly. "No, sweetheart," I whispered. "You were the only innocent one in all of this." She nodded, eyes red. "He told me not to tell you. He said you'd hate me." "I could never hate you," I said. "You're my daughter, by choice, by love, by everything that matters." We held each other for a long time, the way a broken family begins to heal. When we finally walked out of that courthouse, the air felt lighter. The truth had cost me nearly everything. My marriage, my peace, my past. But it had given me something far greater. Freedom. The months after the trial were the hardest and, strangely, the most liberating of my life. The house I once called home now belonged to lawyers and bankers. Every corner of it whispered of deceit, of a marriage built on foundations that had finally crumbled. So I sold it. Every photograph, every reminder of Thomas, I packed away or burned. Grace moved in with me temporarily while she searched for her own place. Those early days were quiet and awkward, like two strangers learning to breathe the same air again. We'd sit at the kitchen table, sipping coffee, staring at the wall, unsure what to say. One morning, she looked at me and said, "You know, I used to dream about calling you Mom without feeling guilty." That broke me. Tears rolled down my cheeks before I could stop them. "You always could, Grace," I said softly, even when I didn't know the truth. Slowly, we began rebuilding what was lost, not as mother and adopted daughter, not even as aunt and niece, but as two women bound by love stronger than blood. We started volunteering at a women's shelter together. I wanted her to see that life could be rebuilt, that pain didn't have to define her. And for me, the silence that used to feel suffocating began to feel peaceful. For the first time in my life, I slept through the night without fear of what tomorrow would bring. One afternoon, as we were cleaning out the attic of my small new home, Grace found a box of old photos. Rebecca, young and glowing, holding baby Grace. She smiled softly. "She looks happy," Grace said. "She was," I whispered. "She loved you more than life itself. She wanted you to be safe." Grace looked at me, her eyes full of understanding. "And you did that for her." That was the first time I felt true peace. I realized that while my marriage had been built on lies, my motherhood had been built on something real, unconditional love. Months later, I received a letter from Thomas's attorney. He had taken a plea deal for financial fraud and was serving time. Attached was a handwritten note in his shaky handwriting. "Margaret, I've had time to think about what I've done. I don't expect forgiveness, but I hope one day you'll find it in your heart, not for me, but for yourself. I destroyed what I loved most because I was afraid of losing it. I hope you and Grace can live free of that fear. Thomas." I folded the letter and placed it in the same box as Rebecca's diary, not out of affection, but as a reminder of everything I had survived. That night, Grace and I sat on the porch watching the sunset. The sky was streaked with gold and crimson, endings and beginnings painted together. She leaned her head on my shoulder and whispered, "Do you ever regret finding out the truth?" I took a deep breath, feeling the cool evening air against my skin. "No," I said. "The truth hurt, but it set me free. I spent decades living in a lie that looked like love. Now I live in truth that looks like peace." Grace smiled. "Mom, you're stronger than anyone I know." I laughed softly. "Maybe. Or maybe I'm just finally learning that strength isn't about holding on. It's about knowing when to let go." We sat there in silence as the light faded. The pain hadn't disappeared completely. It never would. But it no longer ruled me. In time, Grace found her own apartment nearby. She started her career in social work, helping young women who'd faced betrayal and loss. Watching her bloom felt like watching Rebecca's spirit come alive again. As for me, I began writing, not just to remember, but to heal. My story wasn't one of tragedy anymore. It was one of survival. I shared my journey with women who had endured lies, heartbreak, and silence. And every time one of them said, "Your story gave me hope," I knew that the pain had found its purpose. In the end, betrayal had stolen my past but given me something far more valuable: clarity. I learned that forgiveness doesn't mean excusing the unforgivable. It means choosing to live without being chained to hate. I learned that love isn't about secrets. It's about truth, even when it hurts. And most of all, I learned that family isn't written in blood. It's written in the hearts of those who choose to stay, even when everything falls apart. As I close this chapter of my life, I want to say to every woman who's been lied to, used or broken, your story isn't over. You're not defined by what was done to you. You're defined by how you rise from it. So here I am, not a victim, not a wife betrayed, not a woman lost in grief, but a mother, a survivor, and a woman reborn. And that is my truth. Thank you for listening to my story. If this touched your heart or reminded you of your own strength, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more real-life stories that inspire resilience, forgiveness, and courage. Until next time, stay strong, stay kind, and never stop believing in your power to rebuild.